The bike's name, her name's Mustang Sally. We've got 16,000 miles of touring together. We did the Sierra Cascade route, which is up the Sierras and Cascades from Mexico to Canada. And then we kicked out to the coast and went all the way back down again. And then when I was working at Tulane, I left. I biked from New Orleans up the Mississippi River and around the Great Lakes. And then this trip, which I'm 6,400 miles into now, so we've got 16,000 miles of touring on Mustang Sally. She's a Surly disc trucker, and I'm pulling a Burley Nomad trailer behind me.
You like the Surly bike?
Oh yeah. I've got like 16,000 miles of touring on one.
Do you really?
Yeah.
My buddy that works at the bike shop back in Tulsa, he rides a Surly everywhere. He loves that thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the classic touring bike, right? The long haul trucker.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not fast, but it'll get you where you want to go. I mean, it's comfortable. The gearing's great. They're stronger than all get out.
You run tubes?
Yeah.
I just switched my Giant over to tubeless setup. Because out here, man, I was having it was like two flats every trail we hit.
Yeah.
The goat heads are super bad out here, and they're like really stout and thick. They're mean.
Yeah. All right. Hi, I'm Scott Parkinson, and I have a project called Parks Pilgrimage, where I'm biking to every single national park in the lower 48 to raise money for the National Parks Foundation.
Where did you start riding at?
I started there was sort of an interesting beginning to this trip. We started, I worked at the University of Arizona, and I had a partner with me for the first 3,000 miles, and we started from my house in Tucson, and we biked, we were heading up, we did Saguaro first, and then we were heading up towards Petrified Forest and then Grand Canyon, but my partner Alex had never bike toured before. And so after a week of touring through Arizona, where there's lots of climbing, it was beginning to get hot, and there's very few roads, and the roads that are there are very busy, and oftentimes the shoulders were poorly maintained. So by the time we got to Payson, it just seemed like a bad idea to break somebody into touring in such extreme conditions. So we decided to reset the tour, and we rented a truck and drove to Arkansas. And then we dropped the truck off in Hot Springs, or at Little Rock, and then from there we biked to Hot Springs National Park, and then from Hot Springs to Gateway Arch up through Illinois, Wisconsin to Voyagers. We couldn't get onto Isle Royal this year because it was booked out, so I'll have to do that next summer. Then we biked across North Dakota to Teddy Roosevelt, and then across Montana. Right before we got to Glacier, Alex had to leave the trip. She was having some health issues from the smoke, and then from some exposure to the sun. So from there, I went to Glacier, then North Cascades, Olympics. When I was in Aberdeen. When I was going to turn into Rainier, fire caught up. A forest fire started right outside of Rainier that day, and having dealt with a lot of smoke through Montana, Idaho, and Washington, and having a little bit of smoke damage in my own lungs, I decided that I just couldn't keep doing that. So I would do that next summer. So then I headed down the coast, hoping to get Crater Lake, but Crater Lake was smoked out, and Lassen was closed because of fires. So I decided I'd just pick up the mountain ones next summer. So then I headed down. I did Redwoods, then Pinnacles, Channel Islands, Joshua Tree. Then I hooked up and did Grand Canyon, Petrified Forest, and now just a little south of Albuquerque now. My next park is going to be White Sands, then Carlsbad, Guadalupe Mountain, Big Bend, and then I'll head across to Florida and start doing the East Coast ones.
It's really awesome. What inspired you to start doing this?
Well, I love bike touring. Before I started this, I had about 23,000 miles of bike touring. I'd done all the major routes in the U.S., and our national parks are treasures that need to be protected, and unfortunately I don't think they're funded well enough. And so I'd come up with this idea that I'd been thinking about for years to bike to every national park in the U.S., but while doing so, to raise money for the national parks for their conservation efforts. So when I approached the National Parks Foundation, which is the official charity of the national parks, I said I'd love to do it. They were completely on board, and they agreed to put the money into a restricted account so that everything that's donated through my project on the National Parks Foundation website is actually put into a restricted account, and that money can only be used for conservation and preservation efforts within the national parks. So it's for people who are concerned about that, it's an excellent way to give to the foundation and know it's going to go to a project that you really believe in.
So if somebody wanted to donate to that, how exactly would they do it? Like, what website would they go to?
So you can follow me on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook, and it's Parks Pilgrimage. You'll see the logo. The logo's a little mountain bike wheel with a mountain in the back and a sun coming up, and the sun's actually a spokes pattern. And there's a link on each one of those to the National Parks Foundation website where my project resides, and then you could donate directly through that. And the National Parks Foundation is a 501c3 charity, so everything you donate to them is tax deductible, and they actually do provide you with tax papers at the end of the year.
Man, that's really awesome. Can you tell a little bit about like your adventures on the road, like some of the stuff that's happened?
So it's been, I'm just over 6 months on the road. Like I said, when we started, it was hot. There was a lot of climbing. The traffic was bad. When we got to the Ozarks, it was a couple of weeks of rain, which was pretty crazy. When we went up through Wisconsin, Minnesota, it was unbelievably buggy. I mean, unbelievable. Ticks everywhere, mosquitoes on everything. So bad that they would actually chase us into the tents at night. And you could see in between your tent and your fly, there'd be hundreds of mosquitoes just hovering, trying to get into your tent. When we crossed into North Dakota and Montana, that's when the temperatures really spiked. They got up into the hundreds. And when you're out on the plains, there's nothing to protect you. It's just wind and sun. And that's a hard place. And in fact, more people drop out of transcontinental rides on the plains than anywhere else because it can get hard. When the winds come, nothing blocks it. It just stops you dead. You're pedaling as hard as you can. You're going 8 miles an hour. When the sun's out, there's no shade. It's more of a mental barrier than it is a physical barrier. It just and then from Fargo to Cut Bank, which is where you start to climb up into Glacier, it's 1,000 miles of the same thing. So you kind of got to be ready for that. Also, Alex and I spent the first 3,000 miles. I'd say probably half of that was on dirt roads. So we were just out in the country, and that in itself has its own challenges. I remember we were in somewhere in Minnesota, and we were following a dirt road out. We'd followed a dirt road into this primitive campground on a lake called Beatrice Lake, which is absolutely gorgeous. And we were taking Google Maps out to our next stop, and it led us down a dirt road. That dirt road then became double track. Following the double track, and then we can see the county highway like maybe a quarter of a mile ahead. But the bridge that we're supposed to go over has been washed out. So then Alex and I have to make the call. It's either 8 miles back, 2 miles up, and 8 miles back to get to the exact same spot. Or what we did is we just disassembled, took all the bags and the trailer off the bike, and we carried them down it was like a grade that was like this. Carried it down about 50 feet, carried it across the river, then up the other side and put it there. We did it 6 times to get everything to the other side, just to make it that last like 250 yards to get on the county highway and then keep biking. The heat in Montana was unbelievably brutal. The smoke was hard. When I was in Glacier and I was camped at the Apgar campground, you couldn't even see the mountains on Lake McDonald. It was just gray out there. And that was hard. That stretch was pretty hard. And I also couldn't go through the Cascade Highway because it was closed because of fire, so I had to go down Take 2, which is across a really barren stretch of eastern Washington, which gets really hot, and then come up. But so there's a lot of challenges when you're on the road like this, especially for 6 months. I mean, you get some really cold days, you get some unbelievably hot days, you get wet days. But overall, I mean, you just have a lot of fun. I mean, I always warn people about sort of projecting ahead on trips like this, because your mind naturally wants to worry about the bad things. And so what you end up doing is you end up ingesting this diet of all the bad. So you look ahead and you say, oh, I'm biking from, let's say you're doing the Trans Am and you're going Astoria to Yorktown, Virginia. And you think about the mountains and the hot and the cold and the rain and all the things you might encounter. But what you don't do is you don't get the 1,000 great little moments, these small moments that make that trip wonderful, the incredible people you meet, the beautiful campground that you're in, this day where the wind's to your back and it's absolutely gorgeous. And so I tell people, yeah, there's going to be challenges, but don't live on that diet, because that's going to make you're going to have 100 bad ideas in your head, but they're not going to be broken up by the thousands of little wonderful things that you see. So it's important to just stay in the moment, to stay in the day that you're riding and enjoy it, because every day is going to be beautiful. If you have a bad day, it's going to end. What's that old saying? When you go looking for adventure, don't complain when you find it. So, that's the truth. You're out there for that. When you have a bad day, realize that's what you went out looking for. It's not your living room.